continuous improvement plan so that you can find ways to enhance services and processes through incremental and regular improvements. The idea would be, and the hope, the outcomes of your CIP are that you're increasing efficiencies, effectiveness, and quality, and that your outcomes, that you achieve better outcomes for your learners through this whole process. Next slide. It's important to think about the impact of the CIP on your school. So if you think about this as this is really enhancing your program quality, we should all be doing continuous evaluation and refinement of our practices. And that should then lead to better outcomes. It's also with the CIP, it's based on data. And data should be driving that a lot of those decision makings. And so you're using your metrics and you're getting feedback to help you make adjustments along the way and to do some innovation as well. On your learners, your CIP could allow you to do some personalized, could help your learners with personalized instruction where you can tailor your programs to meet their needs. So if you're looking at your data and you're seeing that you have a lot of students that aren't, that are signing up to enroll in your programs and that come to orientation and they don't make it past orientation, well, why is that? So you'd want to investigate that. You'd want to gather data, and then you could tailor perhaps your orientation to ensure that those students then would continue into classes and move through to becoming a participant. It will also help to improve your outcomes. If you're looking at data and you're making decisions based on that, that should hopefully lead to your students having higher completion rates, perhaps better placement in jobs, and moving on to post-secondary education. And lastly, it can help you to look at increasing access for your students to various resources. What are some of those support services that your students might need that's impeding them or a barrier to them from coming from that orientation to actually starting to attend classes and moving through and reaching their goals? Next slide. Some other important facts about the CIP, and I think we've been doing this long enough now that I hope everyone remembers that the CIP is a forward-looking document. You're going to be turning in your continuous improvement plan. It's due the end of April, but it's for the 2025-26 academic year. It has nothing to, it's not for this year, not for this current year, it's forward looking. And if you are part of a CAPE consortium, you can look at how you can align this with your annual plan and more specifically your 3-year plans that you're working on right now. You can also align this to your WASC and your COE accreditation. Because both WASC and COE are aware of our CIP, they have the documents, the Word documents, and so they're wanting us to make sure that when we're doing goal planning and planning, that you're thinking about those accreditations, if you're working through those accreditations as well. And you are allowed to include your CIP with your WASC documentation. And certainly with CAPE 3-year planning right now, this is a great opportunity as a consortium to be looking at your data as a consortium. And maybe there's several of you within your consortium that have some common areas that you want to work on that are put into your 3-year plan that can also then be in your CIP. Please remember the focus areas. You don't have to use these areas as CIP goals, but we are wanting to continue to close those gaps between students that enroll and become participants of 12+ hours, and then those students that are participants to have a pre and a post test matched. And also the collaboration with your Title I partners and your local workforce development board. And really, everything should benefit your students and access to learning for adults. Next slide. So when we talk about data, and I talked about, that you're going to want to gather data, you're going to want to gather data from TE, your data integrity report. You're going to want to look at your NRS tables 4 and 5. You're going to want to also look at, because just opening now will be the implementation coming soon, the implementation survey from CASAS. So look at your implementation survey responses, and are there areas where you want to improve your responses? You'll want to look at your employment and earnings and your follow-up surveys, the responses to the teacher self-assessment, the technology self-assessment, as well as your student technology intake survey, another form of data. Another area to look at that not everyone thinks about is your local workforce development board. What are their industry sectors that are priorities? And what are some of the goals that are in the local workforce development plan that you might be able to piggyback onto? And then any other data sources that you might have, surveys from your students, anecdotal information, all of those pieces are data that you're going to want to be gathering as one of your first steps in your continuous improvement plan. Next slide. You have to have 3 goals. And we started this last year, and I know that it was a challenge at first to come up with 3 goals. One of them is in technology. So one goal is always going to be in technology, and you can use your student intake survey or your teacher assessment results to help you form that goal. Maybe you're going to want to start using North Star digital assessment or implement something similar. And that could be your goal, right? Looking at digital literacy for your students. Or perhaps you haven't quite jumped onto the Canvas bandwagon and you want to get working on that, implementing that learning management system for your school. That can be your technology goal. As we want agencies to consider opportunities for students to learn from home through hybrid courses or online classes, especially now when they might not feel comfortable coming into your school site. You might want to expand your hybrid offerings. And what do you need to do that? And so that could be a technology goal. So those are just some suggestions in that area of technology. We're going to get to the state goal in a little bit, but you can also take our state goal and you can adapt that using your data and where you think you want to go with students. And that would be your second goal that's just about written for you. Next slide, Kathleen. So we're going to talk about what a SMART goal is. And there are these 5 components to a SMART goal. They are specific. They are, it is measurable. It's achievable. Sometimes we try and do more than we think. So make sure it's achievable. It's relevant. And it's time bound. You're always going to want to make sure that you have an end date where you want to reach your goal by. Next slide, Kathleen. And then if you want to make your goal a SMARTY goal, you could include the I and the E, and I is for inclusive. So how do you make your goal inclusive? And also, is it equitable? These aren't requirements that you add I and E and make it a SMARTY goal, but you could if you wished, and if that was a focus area that you wanted to work on, you could include those areas. Next slide. Now this is our state SMART goal. With the focus on, it's really kind of a SMARTY goal, with a focus on equitable access and support for underserved populations. By June 30th, 2026, California Adult Education WIOA Title II agencies will work to increase the percentage from 64% to 70% of students who qualify for all programs as measured by CASAS TE NRS Table 4. So this has all of the components, right? It's specific, it's measurable, right? There's time bound. We have a date that we're going to end it by. It's relevant because this is one of the areas that we've been focusing in on. This is one of those gap areas. And we also believe that it's attainable. You could take this goal and adapt those percentages, right? Put your agency's name in there. Adapt those percentages to your school's percentages for students that aren't getting to that 12-hour plus mark. And then you have this goal written for you. So this is partially in response to some of our agencies that were saying, well, we're really small. It's a lot of work to do 3 goals. So now you have one that's done if you choose to take it, and it's perfectly fine. And I gave you a whole lot of examples on technology goals that you could consider. Next slide, Kathleen. And this is yours, Kathleen.
Yes, so I'm going to take over from here and then we'll both be around to answer some questions. But I wanted to start with this quote by Zig Ziglar: "A goal properly set is halfway reached." So does anybody want to say what they notice about that? What do you think Zig Ziglar means by this quote? You can put it in the chat or you can just unmute and shout it out. What do you think he means? Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. So Stacy says, I think he means setting the goal as half the battle, right? And Ara says, identifying the problem and the solution. The goal should be something you're already working on. You can't achieve without a goal. Stating it makes you halfway there. Exactly. These are all great ideas. And so I'm going to just think a little bit about when creating goals. We wanted to talk a little bit about who is the audience for our goals. So thinking about when you're creating a goal, making sure that everyone that's working on that goal is clear on what the goal is. And so properly setting the goal and involving our stakeholders is one thing. When we are looking at the continuous improvement plan, the process that we use, one of our audiences is going to be the readers. So you know that when you submit your CIP, it is going to be read by at least 2 readers. And those readers have gone through a training to kind of calibrate how do they score goals. They've gone through looking at sample goals and deciding, does it meet those SMART elements? But so when you're writing, I think you also need to write a goal thinking about, hey, if somebody doesn't know my agency, I want to be sure that I'm providing enough context that they understand this goal, so they understand how it meets those SMART elements. So let's dive in and take a look at some practice. So I'm going to give you some examples of goals, and these have been adapted from actual goals that were turned in last year that our readers thought were SMART. So we're going to look first at some examples that we thought were SMART goals. So the first one here, by June 30th, 2025, increase student persistence rates in all programs by 5% over the persistent rates in the 23-24 program year, to increase retention and improve student outcomes as measured by the persistence report and by the percentage of measurable skills gained. So we can see how it's specific. We can see how it's measurable. We even know a little bit about the context of how they're going to measure this. Whether it's achievable, 5% seems like a pretty low percentage. So maybe it's achievable. Is it relevant? Yes, it's relevant to our programs. We're looking at student learning gains here. And is it time bound? By June 30th, 2025. So our readers said, yes, this is a SMART goal. So let's take another example. Do you think this one is SMART? Our goal is to increase the number of high school diploma program graduates by 20% compared to the average number of graduates over the past 3 years. So is it specific? We said yes, it's increasing the number of high school diploma program graduates. Is it measurable? By 20%. 20% over what? The number of graduates over the past 3 years. Oh, Stacy points out it doesn't describe the relevance. And Vita says it's not time bound. Yeah, so even this one that we said was SMART could be improved upon, right? So the relevance, I think we might give them some grace here because we would say it's relevant if you're doing something to increase the number of high school diploma graduates, because obviously we want to increase the number of high school diploma graduates. That's having an impact on our students. 20%, I don't know that we know that that is attainable or achievable. Is that too lofty? We might not know. But it's compared to the average over the prior 3 years. It's not time bound, so they don't specify the time. So that might be an area that would improve this goal, is to say by June 30th, 2026, so that you're actually introducing the goal with the time frame, which is a structure that most of the goals you'll see will do that. So let's take a look at one more example. This one is kind of the overachiever. This one has everything under the sun. And I think this one is particularly interesting when we look at the aspect of relevance. So let's take a look at this one. So this is telling how we're going to do it through implementation of targeted supporting interventions. We will increase the retention rates of adult learners in our education programs by 15% within this next academic year. We'll track the retention rates of adult learners monthly. So they're describing a lot about the how, using enrollment data. They're talking about how they're going to measure it. Enrollment data, attendance records from ASAP. So being very specific, where are they going to get this data? And compare retention rates before and after implementing these supporting interventions. And then they describe what these supporting interventions are: personalized academic advising, flexible scheduling options, tutoring service, referrals to community resources. And then this is the sentence that really hits relevance. Improving the retention rate of adult learners aligns with our organization's mission to provide accessible and high quality education opportunities to all members of the community. And then they talk about we'll achieve a 10% increase in the retention rate of adult learners within the first 2 academic quarters. So they're kind of staggering their goal. They're saying, okay, by halfway through the year, we're going to improve by 10%. And they're trying to show the reader that that means that 15% is attainable. So this is something, this person or these people put a lot into this goal. They packed a lot of those SMART elements into the goal. Do you see that? Okay, so now we're going to go to the clinic. We're going to be the clinicians and we're going to look at some examples where you're going to imagine you're the reader and we're going to think about how we might give these agencies suggestions to improve their goals, to make those goals smarter. So the first one we'll take a look at here. We will utilize the Canvas platform in the development and implementation of the new synchronous course Pharmacy Assistant by June 30th, 2025. So when we think about how to make this particular goal smarter, so we know it's going to be by June 30th. We know what they're going to do. They're going to utilize Canvas. How could they provide more specificity for us? Anybody want to unmute or type in the chat for us? Oh, yeah. So the question is the goal to increase enrollment in the classes or the program? Right. We don't really know what the goal is. We need some way to measure this, right? Oh, Stacy says maybe we could measure it by the number of students. Maybe this is going to increase enrollment in the program. Yes, we need it to be more measurable for sure. What percentage of the course will be in Canvas? That's right. All of those things would help strengthen this goal by making it more specific. Let's look at another one. This was also one that we felt really needed more specificity. 30% of all ESL students with 12 or more hours will complete a level of instruction within the 24-25 school year. What do you see here? What would improve this? What would make it more specific? So Stacy says, what outcomes are expected? And Lori, include the number of classes that will be in, oh, that was for the previous one, I think, Lori, thank you. Yes, as measured by what data? How are we going to measure this? Trisha, you're right. 30% is a huge goal. So we're questioning whether it's attainable. So providing more specific information here would help your reader know, is 30% attainable? We don't know. We don't know what percent of our students are completing a level now. We don't know how they're going to make this change. What are they going to do differently that's going to result in this? So how are they changing action? Okay. So ready to look at another example. We have a couple of examples of making our goals smarter by making them more measurable. So look at this one. Increase the number of students who persist past 12 hours in high school equivalency by June 2025. So that's the goal. How would we make this one smarter? Trisha, needs to be a percentage or number of students to be more specific. It's not measurable. We need some baseline data. That's right. We need the context. And increase by how much? The specific number that you want to meet or exceed. So if a reader is getting this goal, they don't know enough about you, about your organization, about what you say you're doing to be able to say that this goal is smart. And the feedback would be, make it more measurable. Okay, so let's take another look, another measurable goal. By spring 2025, increased certificated teaching of ESL and high school diploma teaching classes available by establishing new classes available within the targeted community and concurrently hire qualified and certified teachers to support class offerings. So that's a goal. So Mark is wondering, is it attainable? How do we know it's attainable? Increase by how much? What specific number of teachers? Thank you, Stacy. Any other advice that you would give this agency? Mark asks, what are they doing? Right. Yeah, Tatiana, I see your hand up.
I wouldn't put anything about hiring teachers in the goal because it's so hard to find qualified and certified teachers right now. So this goal, it does not depend on your efforts, although you may be trying hard and advertising and having interviews, but if they are not available, there is not much you can do. So I wouldn't put it necessarily in the goal hiring qualified or certified teachers.
Right, thank you. And I think you're getting some agreement from others on that one, Tatiana. Yeah, and some other things that are, you kind of wonder with this one, what is the impact that this might have on students, or what is the change that they're really making? How many teachers do they have now? So what is a percentage? What are they going, where are they going to find these teachers? All of that. And Mark points out there's a question about really what is the targeted community? But so there's a lot of need to be more specific with this one. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to show you another goal. This one is one that we really felt like as we look at things that are achievable, this one might kind of illustrate problems with whether or not the goal is attainable. So let's take a look. So by the end of the academic year, June 2025, increase ESL enrollment by 70% through the implementation of the Ventures curriculum, ensuring all ESL learners have access to the appropriate curriculum to complete the program. So that's example number one. Example number two, our goal is to increase the number of high school diploma program graduates by 35% compared to the average number of graduates over the past 3 years. So let's take a look at each of these. So 70%, I think we can agree is a very high goal and might be questioned. And this next one, 35% is a lot and might be questioned without some numbers to indicate how many graduates that would be. So those were things. And I see some of you, oh yes, thank you. So 70% doesn't seem realistic, and I would avoid the word all. Both are very lofty, probably not attainable. And so Oscar, I appreciate, the size of your program might indicate whether that goal was attainable or not. And so again, just imagining when you're writing these goals that you're writing for a reader who doesn't know your program or may not know your program. And so how are you giving them the clues of these things that it is achievable? So let's take a look at some need for relevance. So here were two examples for relevance. We will increase student persistence by reviewing attendance data on a more regular basis, like monthly. How would we make this goal smarter? Oscar, I love that. Like, did a teenager write this?
I would question how reviewing attendance data is going to increase student persistence.
Yes, I agree. We need to make the connection of how reviewing the data is actually going to change behavior. So we know we want to look at data, but is our goal really to increase attendance? Is it, and how are we going to change practice? So are we going to increase attendance by doing X, Y, and Z? And let's see, we have, oh, what will the increase yield? Yes, good point, Jason, thank you. So the second one that we thought kind of looked at relevance for us, we will offer 3 professional learning opportunities to ESL teachers over the year. Any ideas about this one? What would be advice? For what purpose? Thank you, Stacy. Yes. So you could make a SMART goal to do something, like you could write a SMART goal to provide 3 professional learning opportunities to ESL. It could be time bound, though this one maybe isn't as much. It just says over the year. But what we really are looking for with relevance is the impact that it will have on student learning. So when we say a goal is relevant, that's what we're really looking at, is how is this improving student achievement? So what is the professional learning opportunity? How are we going to measure whether the professional learning opportunities that we provided actually translate into increased student achievement? How do we measure something like this? So definitely could use some support with these. And then finally, let's take a look at this time-bound one. Our goal is to increase awareness of the adult school programs by building a customer base through social media followers. The goal will be deemed a success when we achieve a minimum of 100 followers across 3 social media platforms from the starting point of 0 followers. So when we look at this one, we thought it had some problems with being time bound, but it may have some other problems too. So what do you see here? What would you recommend to this goal writer? If you don't want to take the time to type, you could unmute. I see Stacy is writing. Oh, and yes, thank you. Okay, so we have, what will the social media awareness result in? What type of awareness? Who are the followers? Are they potential students? It needs a deadline, the time frame to get the 100. How will it benefit the students or the school? Yes, what's the impact that we're looking to make? And Nick talks about tying to enrollment. So those are things that would definitely improve. Oh, and consider selecting one social media platform rather than all 3. Rather than 3, I should say. Anything else? What student outcomes will be impacted by this goal? Exactly. How is increasing awareness impacting student outcomes? So let's move on. I think you are getting the picture of not only what goals we've seen, how to strengthen those goals. So when you're writing those goals, you're actually writing and you're imagining, if I was a reader who knew nothing about this school, how would I ensure that it's really clear? So let's take a look. We're going to just have you take a quick poll. I think Josie's going to post a poll for us to just answer the question, where in the process are you now? So are you identifying your team? Are you scheduling meetings? Are you gathering data? Are you analyzing results, setting SMART goals, writing action plans? Where are you on this continuum? Okay, so it looks like we have 35 of you who have reported so far, and it looks like the majority of us are between steps 2 and 3. We're scheduling meetings or we're gathering data. We have 1 of 37 that's already writing action plan. We've got 5 that are setting goals, 5 that are analyzing their data, and 3 that are working on identifying their performance team. So the majority of us are falling in steps 2 or 3 right now. Thank you. I'm going to pull this down so you won't see it anymore. So Marion, I think you're going to talk about this particular slide.
Yes, I am. Just to reassure you, there is lots and lots of support for completing the the continuous improvement plan successfully. So there will be a video. Carolyn did a more extensive introduction to the CIP that will be posted soon on the OAR site where you go to actually submit it. And once that is posted in early February, there will be a Q&A with Dr. Zachary on questions you have about the CIP. There will be a couple of webinars in February. One, a big overview. The date hasn't been settled for that one yet. And on March 17th, one for small agencies, as Kathleen noted, your numbers will look good if you're a very small agency. I had one last year that said they were going to increase their high school diploma program by 100%. And I questioned that, of course. That sounds really extremely lofty, but they only had one the year before. So if they got one more, that was 100%. So we want to focus on helping those smaller agencies. Then there will be office hours, which is just people that have worked closely with the CIP will be online. You can just come ask your questions. You might get into a breakout room with somebody to just work with you on your particular question, or it might be a group discussion. I see a lot of names of people who participated in these last year, so hopefully you found that fruitful. And then you can also request individual support by emailing support@otan.us, which is like a 15-minute phone or Zoom conversation with somebody to answer any specific questions that you have. So you just watch hope you're on the email list for CalPro or OTAN, and or go looking at the CA Adult Ed Training.org calendar to find the dates for these things, but you will be receiving more information about these. Thanks, Kathleen.
Thank you, Marianne. So at this point, what I was hoping you could do is just think about your next best step. So you know this deadline's coming up. You know you're going to be writing 3 goals. You know where you are on the continuum in terms of the steps. So if you could make a commitment to yourself to do one thing and kind of jot yourself a note, put it on your calendar. I'm going to give you a second or two to do that. Does anybody want to share out what the next best step you identified for you or your team to do to move toward this, developing your 3 goals? I'm waiting for someone to either type in the chat or to declare, unmute and declare what they have identified as the next best step. Oh, thank you, Jason. So Jason's going to gather data and review with the team. Perfect. And Sarah, I see you indicating some concern about finding some of the goals, like the state goal. And the state goal is stated in the CIP guidance. Is that correct, Carolyn?
Yes, it is. The CIP goal, the state CIP goal is in the Word document.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So looking to see that our CIP goals are aligned with CAPE, that's a great place to start. All right. Nicole's going to continual updates with her to our CIP that align with the work we're doing. Yes, I think aligning that work with WASC and with your CAPE 3-year planning is really smart. It's a way to kind of leverage your efforts and leverage resources. Okay, great. Thank you, Suzanne. So I think at this time we have some time for questions. So Carolyn and I are available to just answer some questions. Tatiana, I see your hand up.
Yes, in my experience, it takes more than 1 year to reach a goal. We are just planning and starting some activities, and then maybe the next year we refine the process so it comes up to fruition a little later than 1 year. We need more than 1 year to complete the goals. I'm looking at my current plan and I'm thinking, you know, we did reach some partial goal, but we have not reached the goal in entirety. So I was wondering, what do you do in that case? I know in the past we were able kind of to roll over. Is it still the process that we can continue? It seems to me just 1 year is not enough to complete some goals.
So yes, you can still roll them forward. And I would say that perhaps your goals might be a little too big, Tatiana, if you can't do them in a year. Maybe you want to look at things that are more incremental. I like the idea though of thinking sort of like your in the CAPE we do the 3-year planning. I like the thought process of kind of a multi-year plan, but perhaps you want to break those larger goals into a smaller goal that's more doable in a 1 year process. Kathleen, anything else to add?
No, I was just going to say, if you are carrying forward a goal, sometimes having that 1 year is like the way to prove to yourself that it wasn't attainable. And so when you do carry it forward, then amending that goal so that you're really making it, what can I achieve this year? What can we achieve in this year? Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Other questions? Trisha, I see you unmuted. Were you going to ask a question?
I was just trying to figure out how to raise my hand here. Can you hear me? Okay, here we go. So please forgive me, I'm rather new to the CIP process. Paige Endo, our longtime vice principal, always had this task, and I inherited it this year as she retired. We are coming up on our self-study for WASC, noticing the statements in there about trying to align to CAPE and WASC. I was like, oh, that's exactly what I've been thinking of as well. We have our self-study coming up for WASC, and we're also thinking about doing a self-study for our CAPE goals that we had set with the consortium, doing a self-study on just how our school is doing this. And there was a question in there about somebody that was using data, one of your samples, and I got interrupted at just the wrong time. And so is there any suggestions from the group is there a way where I could bring that into a goal? And I haven't thought this all the way through, but I just thought since you had time and I have the experts there, I thought I'd go ahead and ask for some help.
Well, if I'm understanding your question, it's basically how do you translate your data into a goal area? And so, Carolyn's statement about mind the gap. So sometimes our data, and that's why I kind of like the SMARTY goal. Sometimes when we're looking at our data, we might think that our performance looks healthy and good. But if we disaggregate our data, for example, we might see that there's a certain population of students that aren't performing as well as other students. And so let's say in our school, we were noticing that a certain, maybe we're underrepresented in the number of male high school diploma graduates. So we see that and we're wondering, we have enrollment, but we're not seeing our males finish. So that would be a way to look at data and say, wow, we need a goal around this. Now that isn't going to be enough to make me write a goal, because I can't just say I'm going to increase the graduation rate. That can be my goal, but now I'm going to have to figure out, why is it? What are the contributing factors? What do we think are going to change? How am I going to improve the graduation rates for males in our high school diploma program? And so I might have a focus group. I might gather some additional data. I might talk to students. I might survey students who've completed before. I might talk to our counselors. We might start thinking about what support services are we providing. So it's a way that the data is going to give you a clue about what the gap is, but the data might not prescribe what the fix is. You're going to have to get some additional data. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Thank you. I get it.
Carolyn, did you want to chime in on that one?
Actually, I wanted to chime in on a question that was in the chat.
Okay.
So Sarah has said they're planning to continue at least one, if not two, of their goals, and asked if that was okay. And yes, it's okay, because I also think that as you're trying to improve, let's say, persistence, and you want to get from, let's just say it's not really good, let's say it's like 30%, and you eventually want to get that up to 80%, you are going to have to, as we were talking about earlier, with Tatiana, have those incremental goals. So you have a long-term vision for where you want to be, but you're going to have to be repeating those goals every year. But the other piece you're going to want to look at is, are there new, if you're being successful with that goal, right? So your first year is you want to increase persistence by 10%, and maybe you ended up increasing by 15. That means that perhaps in this next year you want to, change that percentage amount. So you can continue those goals, but I would encourage you to really evaluate them and tweak them and make sure that you have up-to-date data that you're using in those goals. I hope that helps, Sarah. And then I see Jason has his hand up.
Thank you for taking my question. So I was really interested in this whole idea of like disaggregating data, and then what it results in is that you see that males are not graduating. But I want to be clear, when you're writing the goal, to add that description of male in the goal would perhaps be too specific, but it does give you cause for what are the contributing factors, or it gives you a cause for inquiry into what improvements you might want to be thinking about. I just wanted to be clear on that, right?
Mhm. Absolutely right. Thank you, Jason. What else? Anything else on your mind?
Jason, let me also add on to that, that I would say even in your action plan, you may want to put a step in there that you're going to, like at the end of the year, you're going to evaluate the graduation rates male to female, so that you have it documented somewhere that that's part of the area that you're looking at, and you're trying to discover what those barriers are for those male students. So
Thank you.
And Marian, I see that you just typed in the chat that we will be posting with the webinar, the PDF of the slides, because I think people have been very interested in the slides.
Yes. Sorry, don't be anxious about that. We can post a PDF along with the recording on the CalPro website, and there will be more specific information when Carolyn's introduction video is also posted on the OAR site. So when you log in to actually start completing your plan, you're going to see a lot of resources linked there.
Okay, so I don't know that there are any more questions, but if there are, you can type them in the chat. I think I'll drive us forward. So the next thing we want to ask you to do is please complete the evaluation for today's session. Thank you, Josie, for putting that in the chat. The link is easy to grab here. And then Marian, do you want to close it out?
I guess just thank you all very much for attending today. We appreciate your input and your questions and suggestions, and we look forward to seeing you in future webinars, office hours, individual coaching sessions on the CIP. And thank you, Dr. Zachary and Kathleen, for providing your expertise today. And hopefully this was helpful for all of you. Please do complete the evaluation, because next year we'll be here sooner than you think, and we'll be seeing what we need to revise for next year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.